where I see that things have gone wrong is that the state board, I think you have a lot of money being poured to bring things into school districts and change things, kind of, cultural revolution, change norms. We're seeing things across the country where boundaries are being pushed, parents are being undermined, faith, freedom's being undermined. Children are being taught that socialism is the answer that we want to move towards, this new utopian society.
Hey everybody, we're excited to announce our newest brand partner, Tuacahn Amphitheater. If you don't know Tuacahn, it's Southern Utah's premier concert and live theater production company in Snow Canyon here in the heart of Southern Utah. We're excited to have them on board. If you're a fan of the show, you know we like to go deep on all things Southern Utah: business, politics, entertainment, real estate, you name it. Our goal is to understand Southern Utah with an open mind from a place of curiosity, and Tuacahn is a great sponsor and partner in that same mission, and we're excited to have them on board. If you don't know Tuacahn, go check out their 2024 entertainment lineup and enjoy what they have to offer. And thanks for being a part of this, guys. We appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the 435 podcast. I'm your host, Robert McFarland, and today we talk about education in Utah. Joann Brinton sits down with us as she is running for the State Board of Education. We cover a lot of ground. I hope this episode raises some questions for you, answers some questions for you, but it's definitely one that I'd love to see some engagement on. Please like and subscribe, get in the comments, let us know how the conversation is going for you, and we appreciate all your support. Thank you to our brand sponsors, FS Coffee Company, Blue Form Media, Tuacahn Amphitheater. We love the support of our community. We're excited to keep it growing here in Southern Utah. So enjoy this episode, guys. We'll see you out there. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Texas.
Okay.
And the Rio Grande Valley, right on the border of Mexico, a town called Brownsville. You can't
go
any farther south.
My great aunt, she owned thousands of acres out there.
Really?
It may have been great aunt. Aunt Millie is what she's known for, because she was smart enough in that era. So this would have been the mid to late 1800s. Mm-hmm. She was smart enough to carve off mineral rights, and she put the mineral rights into trusts, and then it's basically been passed down to all of family ever since.
And through Texas,
through Texas. So she had oil and natural gas and all kinds of different mineral rights and stuff from land that she's owned down there, especially in Brownsville. Okay. And yeah, it's not a lot at this point because there's so many family members that kind of just like my mom will get like $20 and $30 checks, maybe every month, but it's just like constantly there's always like some money, and sometimes they'll get $100 checks, but they were a natural gas, liquid natural gas company offered to purchase the natural gas rights in one section of Brownsville. And yeah, for, a pretty good substantial amount of money, but this is, generations later that it's still going to the family. So it's kind of interesting, Brownsville, Texas, but Aunt Millie was smart enough to
Millie, what was her, the last name?
My mom is going to listen to this and she's like, I can't remember the name. Aunt Millie is all I got. That's all I got.
Well, my parents get royalty checks from oil that goes back from like great grandma's parents. And they have just said, never sell. You never sell those rights. Yeah. So, and sometimes it's thousands of dollars and sometimes it's hundreds. And So
it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm familiar with Brownsville. So how long did you live there?
Till I was 16. I grew up there.
Okay.
I was born in Harlingen, which is like right down. Anyway, lived in Raymondville for a couple of years, but then I think we moved to Brownsville when I was 2. And my parents, we moved here when I was in high school to northern Utah. So, but I still claim Texas.
Claim Texas, yeah. Well,
it's in my roots, and have family still in the Rio Grande Valley, kind of all over Texas.
Yeah.
But my parents, just the economy down there, they grew up there, and as teenagers crossed the border. That was really common to go over to Mexico, no drinking age, and they were really worried about us being teenagers there. Yeah. And they were converts to the LDS faith and had some connections here and wanted to get out of South Texas with the economy too. The peso had been devaluated, and so they moved us to Utah, which was really hard at 16 to leave.
Yeah, 16 is a weird age to go hit the restart button.
It is.
So then, did you go to university? Did you go to college?
I did. I went to BYU. I went for a couple of years, and then I got married and had a family. So I pulled out of school and got divorced when my two boys were 6 and almost 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd lived in Idaho for a little bit. But then I came back and lived with my parents in northern Utah, and they helped me go back to school and finish my teaching degree at BYU.
Nice. Cool.
And then I taught in some charter schools. I did some elementary and some middle school. Taught history finally after a couple years at American Leadership Academy in Spanish Fork.
Okay.
It was a brand new charter school. I think it was 2005 when it opened, and I helped write the history curriculum and was there for 3 years.
Cool.
And just love it. It was such a great education for me to come up with the curriculum with some great mentors there that just loved our country and the founders and Constitution. And anyway, so
growing up in school, history was always my favorite subject. Yeah. My dad, I just grew up, we had the History Channel on all the time. That was back when the History Channel wasn't a bunch of reality shows. It was like actual like documentaries on World War I and II and the Revolutionary War. And, it's funny to look at the History Channel now versus what it was growing up, because it was legitimately like a documentary, type show. And now
for years. Now
it's a lot of reality shows, and some of it's probably accurate as far as what it's giving out, but it does feel very scripted, and you're like, what's real and what's not. It's like this ambiguous line between what's real and then what's made up, what's entertainment, But I loved history. Was my favorite subject. Revolutionary War in that era was always I was most interested in that, just because it felt so far away. It felt so foreign. There was nothing similar to then as it is now, as far as like, the type of warfare and then the clothes they wore. I just was fascinated with it was almost like a fantasy, and the fact that it was real was just so fascinating to me. And I love that.
Well, we have such a great story. America has such a great story that's so inspiring. We have so many people that fled here to have freedom, freedom from religious persecution, whatever it was. And so I love the story of our founding and the founding fathers. And I worry sometimes now today at the revisionist history being portrayed. The founding fathers, they're not looking at their full stories. Yeah. I just visited, Mount Vernon. And in September, I was in Washington, D.C. for a conference and went out to Mount Vernon. And to me, that's sacred ground. George Washington's home, you just feel an energy there. All that he created, the innovation, the stuff. Thomas Jefferson was the same. I haven't been to his house yet, but I loved it. And then I was also sad visiting, because our tour guide taking me through the house was this liberal grad student who pointed out some of the artifacts, but the only positive thing about George Washington that she mentioned was that he stepped down after 2 terms, and he paved the way for that to be the precedent in our country, right?
Interesting.
And I thought, that's it? Like, that's the only thing you're going to point out about him. And then we get to the end of the tour in the house, and there's people from around the world on this tour. And she's holding up this sign, and it's got hundreds of people in, there was probably 150 or something, I don't remember, in beige. And then there was like 15 in green or red. That was the paid servants. The beige were all the slaves. And then you've got 6 people in green representing the family. And she was like, look at this whole, look at all these people that were there just to serve this family. I thought, that's what people are going to take away from this tour. You're not going to talk about all the things that he did for our country, that he freed his slaves. It's a different time. And I get so sad when I see people judging the past through our lenses today, rather than looking at the complete history. I mean, slavery was a sad thing. We wish it hadn't existed, but it goes back to the dawn of time. Everybody, if we look at our roots long enough, white people were enslaved. People came here as indentured servants. Like, there's such a bigger picture that gets forgotten or on purpose, I think, left out to drive a narrative today. And that I worry about that.
Well, it's a pendulum too, though, right? So like it swings back and forth. So there's, that story, the slavery story might not have been told for, generations. That piece of history might not have been told at the fair weighted value of that history for a long time, because there's some shame there. I think there's some validness, but it's going back to, what you said about let's let's have the complete, why can't we have the complete story? Why are we having to say, okay, I was listening to somebody talk about how, this side of the story had decades and centuries to be told. So we don't need to tell that story anymore. We need to tell this story now. It's like, wait a minute. That's not, I don't think that's right either. Right. It's like, why can't we just tell the story? Why don't we just tell the full story?
Yeah. Just tell the full with flaws and everything. Because that's where we learn the best. And, you've probably heard, I'm sure, history, those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it, right? That we see these things
and we can't help it either.
Yeah.
There's a big part of it. It's like, we just can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if we remember, it doesn't change. A lot of times it just doesn't change our behaviors. Right. We refuse to, we almost refuse to acknowledge the mistakes that we've made in the past. Even if we know what those mistakes are, we like to bury those things. But it's a challenging piece. That's like you're
telling me my heart rate's high. I don't know. Sorry, I'm going to take that off.
You're like, I don't want him to know every time that I get it. I know. I sometimes worry.
I start talking about history and I
get excited, get passionate about it.
I do.
So, the revisionist history, where do you feel like, when you were going through that teaching and building that curriculum, did you find any value in some of that revisionist stuff? Malcolm Gladwell's one of my favorite writers of all time.
Okay, I haven't read.
And he has a podcast called Revisionist History, where he looks back, through where time has enough to be able to inspect all of these different elements. So whether it's, for an example, and I don't even know if this is one of the episodes, but if you were to review back in history, the Boston Tea Party and what they were fighting against, and then what happened after the fact with taxes. So once we relieved from the shackles of the king and the British Empire and what we were fighting over because of the increase in taxes, what actually happened to the taxes on tea once we had our freedom? And it's interesting to see that the taxes on that imports and those fees actually went up by like 600% over the next 15 years. The taxes went just crazy.
Well, you've got the Revolutionary War, right? So they had all this crazy inflation and problems with currency.
So it's almost like we can be frustrated with, a lot of times it's the situation that we have versus the one that we're trading for. Are we actually trading for something better, or are we trading for something, what caused us to rebel at one point? Then what we're left with at the next point is maybe slavery just to ourselves versus slavery to, a foreign power that's across the ocean. Right. So it's interesting to be able to look at all of those functions of it, rather than just be like, oh, and then we won our independence and then everything was great.
Well, and I think there was a period where things were so hard in the fighting and the revolution and the inflation and figuring things out. But the principle that they were fighting for, to not have a foreign government impose taxes where they had no representation and vote to say, eventually that was overturned. Yeah. And so it took a while. It always takes a while. There's a lot of struggle to get to where you need to be.
And that goes back to being able to tell the whole story and understand. Right. So it's, what pieces do we tell in third grade, and then what pieces do we tell again in high school, and what pieces do we tell in college, and building these pieces together where it's complex, it's nuanced. All these things are, they're not as cut and dry as people like to lay them out.
Well, and I read a book when I was prepping to teach at this new charter school. They were following the Thomas Jefferson education model, which goes back to how the founding fathers learned. They read books. They read the great works, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. They're reading these documents, and then they would discuss them with a mentor and look at the pros and cons and debate the ideas. And that was such a great education for me to prep. And I did that. And I was able to do that in my history classes, and it didn't really carry over for other subjects well. So there was that doesn't work as well in math maybe or something, or
science.
But it was such a great education for me to create the curriculum, to use that Socratic method. And that's what I feel like our schools, we've been missing for so long, that we're not teaching kids how to think and reason and look at both sides of issues. It's a teacher-student model where we pass out the information, read this, accept it as truth, memorize it, and take a test on it. And I learned so much, like I said, at that charter school, that I would love to see more teaching how to think and look at both sides, and being okay with arguing things out in a respectful way, like vet ideas, see how how they hash out. Because if there's truth, if something's worth fighting for, if it's a good idea, then it's defendable, I guess. So I worry sometimes in our today's day where we see a lot of propaganda and people being canceled if they question things. And I don't always agree with the methods of questioning. I think we need a lot more civility and just sitting down to talk and seeing people, like making connections, right? Talking face to face, not just bashing people on social media. That's not effective to bring people to the table and get people to think and listen to ideas. And it's okay to disagree. I look at the founding, one of my favorite movies, it's a little cheesy. BYU did this production, A More Perfect Union, it was called.
I've heard of it.
I think they did it in the 90s, but I watched it with my 8th graders and they fought things out. They argued. They all had these different ideas as they came together to create our Constitution. And I still haven't made it to Philadelphia, but I look at the movie. They were dressed in full suits and wool clothes and sitting in Philadelphia summer, which is humid and hot, and spent months coming together with ideas. But there was a lot of fighting back then, too.
And arguing and debate.
And arguing and debate.
And duels.
Yes, duels. Yeah.
How dare you, sir?
I know.
I challenge you to a duel.
Yeah. And when I read Alexander Hamilton, I read the book that Chernow wrote that preceded the play that so inspired Lin-Manuel Miranda, whatever his name.
Lin-Manuel.
So I read that book, and after having taught American history, I love the founding fathers. I have kind of maybe a weird relationship with Tom, but I thought I kind of have to break up with Thomas Jefferson for a little while. Like, I have idolized him. I love him. But the way that he and Alexander Hamilton taught, and that song in the Hamilton play where it says, who lives, who dies, who tells your story. It's like those who live tell the stories. And Alexander Hamilton, his role, his key pivotal role in writing the papers that he did and getting the Constitution through is pretty much, it's played down. You don't hear a lot about Hamilton. Because he was very confrontational,
and he was shot.
He had that duel with Aaron Burr, and he was shot. But I learned so much about him and came to appreciate him so much in Chernow's book. It was like 40 hours on Audible, but you can speed it up and listen to it quicker.
I was John Adams. I read the biography by McCullough on John Adams and the relationship he had with Jefferson and the mutual respect that they had for each other, and also the mutual disdain that they had for each other. I think is really fascinating, because it's something that we almost take for granted nowadays. It's almost like if, and I see this a lot where it's, and I've heard this with some delegates where they're like, well, you can tell if somebody, how they're going to vote or where they align with the people that they interact with and people that they work together with. And I'm not quite sure I believe that. I'm not quite sure I believe that. I think it's possible to disagree with somebody and work closely with somebody that you disagree with on a lot of pretty big topics. But the requirement is that we be able to set some of those things aside in order that we can make effective progress on things that are important to the community and the church or the people that you're serving.
Absolutely.
And then there's some things that you stand, immovable on. And then other things where you say, okay, in these moments, where can the politics of it, right? To be able to say, okay, and there's a challenge between compromise and consensus, right? Are we compromising on something, or are we coming to consensus on what exactly we should do, move forward? But just like with the founding fathers, you're trying to anticipate and forecast how this decision is going to play out in time. And sometimes it's impossible to do that.
It is.
And so I think of how do we bring this back to education? So you're running for the State Board of Education, right?
Am. Yes.
And what, with your understanding of history, what made you decide this is something that you wanted to sign up for and take this on? Because it's not for the faint of heart running for an elected office.
I didn't see it coming. And, I don't know, I'm a person of faith. And I think through COVID really is what woke me up and got me involved in politics.
I hear that a lot.
I watched so many people out of fear crumble. And I worry, there's a quote that I think it's Jefferson that says maybe it was Ben Franklin that said those who give up essential liberty for some security, like you end up with neither. So I worry about fear being used to drive control. And I decided I wanted to know the people locally who were in politics because I could see how they were affecting our daily lives more than maybe who's in Washington. Although with the inflation right now, kind of go, maybe not. But so I got involved and I got involved with Republican women, and I didn't even know that was a thing. And it's just kind of led me to being a delegate and being involved in caucus and convention and precinct chair. And I was just praying last year, like, why do I care so much? I drive my kids crazy, drive my husband crazy, talking about politics and education, and probably driven some friends away because I just think about it all the time. I'm reading and listening to podcasts, and I love learning. And I look at bigger pictures. What's coming down? Who benefits? That's one of the key lines from that A More Perfect Union movie that I loved. Cui bono. It's a Latin phrase for who benefits. I look at agendas and who's driving things. So I just have gotten involved and started praying, like, why do I care? What am I supposed to do with that? And this was kind of dropped in my lap. I was approached by a couple different people and asked to run for the state school board. I had not been following them very closely, just kind of, I follow education and I'm concerned about our state and some of where we're headed, the grades going away till 8th grade, where we only have like a 1 through 4 now. I'm watching things, had heard a lot about sexual books in the schools.
Hold on, grades?
Grades. So grades in our schools, like my kids no longer have an A, B, C, or D, or F until 8th grade.
Okay.
Actually, is it even, I'm trying to think, it might be 9th grade that the grades, but I think maybe it's 8th. But it's a 1 through 4. They've gone to a 1 through 4. And that 3 is really ambiguous. 3 just means you're on grade level. You could be an A minus, you could be a C. How do you know? Where is that? The kids don't really even know. I'm a 3. I'm on grade level. I'm fine. So I worry about dumbing things down or lowering of standards that I'm seeing rather than excellence. Where I grew up in Texas, I had all honors classes. I knew the same. I was with the same kids a lot through 10th grade, knew that from kindergarten. And I think that we do better when we have things to work for and we have hope and America is based on merit.
That's interesting because I hadn't heard anything about the grade thing. In college, I had a teacher. He was actually a political ideology teacher.
Okay.
Shout out to Marcus Green, Professor Marcus Green, Professor Marcus Green.
Yeah.
He taught political ideology across the board, right? So whether it's, authoritarian dictatorships, whether it's, Hobbes and a monarchy, or is it a republic or a pure democracy or communism, like all these different ideologies. So that's the class he taught. And he had a 4-point system in his grades. Okay. He didn't do A, B, C. And he explained it to us and it made so much sense to me. And it's like all through school, you have your grade point average, you got A, B, C, D, and then F, and then it got translated into a point system. A 4.0 would be all A's, right? Sure. And so, but he took it all the way to the individual assignments, right? So even your assignments were on a 4-point scale. So it was easier for me to understand, especially because it would be, a 3-point something, right? So it gives the scale. So you actually ended up, if it was just 4 or just 3 or just 2 or just 1, that'd be confusing. But it was, 3.9 or 3.8 or 3.7. Okay. So it was almost as a percentage thing. So for me, it made a whole lot of sense.
Which is what we graduated with, right?
Yeah.
You would have like a 3.97. Or
It made sense. It made sense to me, but it's also, I could see how when you make changes like this, it's hard to like wrap around. Going back to what you said is like, who benefits from this? Like, what's the purpose of this? Right. Are we really? Is this solving a problem that is? What's the problem that this is solving? Or are we just justifying, we're going to change this thing because we want to justify that we're supposed to be doing something. And this looks like we're busy.
Yeah. And I feel like most people in education and there's reasons. And it's important to understand both sides of the reasons. And so the theme of equity, which some people, equity, trying to be fair. They're trying to be fair with things. I feel like equity is also used in Marxism, and it's equal outcomes and so to me, it seems like we have to be careful with equity to make, is it fair for everybody? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like you kill people's drive if they work just as hard. If you don't have grades that match your work ethic, I guess, that if somebody is just passed along and gets the same grade where I've spent 4 hours on a project and they spent no time and they just jumped in and put their name on it, but we don't want to make them feel bad, that kind of a thing. I worry with programs like affirmative action, and, we've seen the legislature swing more conservative and come out and say, we want to get rid of the DEI programs and critical race theory across the board. I think these programs start with good intentions, but they can be really destructive and send the wrong message. And so as I was presented and thinking about it, I just felt like I should jump in, and that maybe there is a reason that I care so much. Yeah. And with my background of history and looking at bigger pictures, and I want to see our kids taught full history. I want them to love their country. We have a lot of students graduating. Utah graduates 9 of 10 students, and they brag about that a lot, but half of them can't read, write, or do math at grade level. The proficiency rates have gone down. And I called Utah Tech because I had a math teacher here locally tell me that Math 900 has skyrocketed, which is remedial math. It's like going back to, 8th grade, 5th to 8th grade math skills to be able to do your college math. And so you've got to go into university. We have I think they said 10 times it's gone up, the enrollment in Math 900 at Utah Tech.
Interesting.
In the last, I don't know if it's 4 to 6 years, but the rates are going down of our kids' proficiency and understanding. And so I'm just trying to be part of solutions and helping. And as I've started watching the board and studying them for the last 4 months, I'm just disappointed in the vote from our area and the kind of the majority of the board. Like the legislature made the state school board, it used to be appointed. So this has been a big education for me. They were appointed for a long time by the governor. And education in general is just more progressive and liberal. They've got higher ed thinking, and but they made it nonpartisan, and then it was an elected position. And I'm not sure when that passed, but 4 years ago, the legislature changed it to be a partisan race to try to bring some more accountability onto the school board. So we now have 2 Democrats and 13 Republicans on our state school board. And our area, I think it maybe was more just Utah.
Okay, here, let's slow down. Okay. Let's slow down a little bit. Okay, so it started as an appointed position.
And I'm not sure if it was elected before that. I don't know the whole history, but for a long time it was appointed. So when under like Mike Levitt and I believe Huntsman, like for a while we had appointed boards that the governor would appoint.
So so just on the macro, we had an appointed board of education, the Utah State Board of Education.
Yes, and it is a constitutionally established board in our state constitution.
So there is a so it's within the Constitution. So then it was appointed, and then at some point, it doesn't really matter when, but at some point, it was goes to an elected position.
Yes.
And no longer appointed by the governor.
Right.
And then how many? 4
years ago,
How many board members?
15.
So there's 15 board members.
15 different districts and board members, yes.
So the state's divided up into districts, and that's based off of population or number of schools, or how does that, do you know what that is?
You know what? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm coming in from.
I'm not sure.
I have a 8-year-old.
I should know that.
I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and I'm like, all right, it's a whole nother like aspect of where, and this is where I get why voters get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they're like, the amount of time and energy it takes to not only vet the candidates by understanding what the issues are, but it's also understanding the background of like all these pieces. And then it's like, who is to benefit? Going all the way back to that, I think that's a brilliant thought to always kind of keep top of mind. But it's a massive mound of information.
It is.
And so when we started the podcast, I was like, oh, this would be an opportunity for somebody to tune in and kind of flush out some of these issues and have these long form. And the more you learn, the more you find out you don't know anything, or I don't know anything.
Oh no, that's how I feel too.
So voters can be overwhelmed, and they're just like, Rob, tell me who to vote for.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I
hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just tell me who to vote for? Because I know you care. Can you just give me your advice? So that's why I'm a big advocate for the representative system, right? Of like saying, okay, some people are going to have the ability to focus in on these areas and others aren't.
Right.
So we're going to explore this together. And I don't expect you to know everything. And I hope everybody else understands that there's a lot to know.
It's huge.
It's huge. So there's 15 seats. How many in our area? Is there just one or two in our area?
There's just one board member for each district.
Okay.
And our district is 15. We're the bottom.
Okay.
And it goes from Washington County all the way over to San Juan County. So it encompasses a little bit of Iron. Okay. And then it's also got Garfield, Kane, Wayne County, and Paiute County.
So as far as that demographic, so it's a representative that's representing all of the schools within that district. And then what is it that the state board is, I guess maybe on a macro level, what is it that what's their job?
Their job is to set the policy and the standards for the state. They also handle and I think disperse the budget. Okay. There's a lot to the job that I'm still learning, but they filter investigations. They have meetings once a month. They get together and they're deciding policy. They're also the board over the School of the Deaf and the Blind. Okay. And there's 3 different committees. And so they have a standards and curriculum committee. They have a finance committee. And then they have a laws and licensure, I believe it's called, so the board, those 15 members are then broken up into 3 different subcommittees. Yeah. So they'll have their general meetings they meet once a month on Thursday and Friday, the first Thursday and Friday of the month. And they have their general meetings on Thursday and then their committee meetings are on Fridays.
Yeah. So then they're distributing policy to go out to the individual schools. And then they're setting the policies, but then the local school districts boards, the local boards are supposed to be, they call them LEAs. I have learned that there are 600 different acronyms in education. I don't know. That's a government thing.
Yeah.
Alphabet people.
Yeah, they're alphabet people. I'm like, this is kind of chaotic. How do you
this makes it easy?
Remember, the ABCS and the CC. Yeah, it's crazy.
Elon Musk. I'll note this. I'm a fan of Elon Musk in a lot of ways. I'm not a fan in a lot of ways as well. But one thing when he, I think this is when, I think he made this policy at SpaceX. Where he specifically, but I think he's made that policy at Tesla as well, is acronyms are not allowed. Yeah. They're not allowed.
I think they should be done away with.
If any individual employee in the entire company is caught using acronyms more than the second time they use an acronym, they're fired.
Oh, wow.
He put out a memo to the entire organization. It says any use of acronyms is grounds for termination. Hey, we're not going to, because we get into these situations where it starts with this language. It's this own specific lingo that if you don't know the lingo, you can't really, you put these little information silos in. And his perspective was as soon as you're carving off your little silo of information and nobody else has access to it unless they can speak your language, it's grounds for miscommunication. And then also you're carving out your own little fiefdom of information. So I completely understand that perspective, but we have acronym wild in the military and in all levels of government. Acronyms are crazy. Yeah.
And it's really hard to follow and keep up on. And I have to wonder, is that by design so people don't know what's going on?
There's for sure, maybe unintentional design, but there is some, it's a fundamental thing of a cult, right? You got to create your own language. You have to create your own team. You got to all have jerseys on. Everybody's got to say the same thing. We got to rally together, right? And businesses do this a lot because they want to build culture. And so anyway, what was the acronym that you were just using? The LEM?
LEA.
LEA.
So that's the Local Education Association, I think.
Local Education Association.
That's what people call the local school boards, the LEAs, which was new to me to learn that. Yeah. Yes.
So we have our Washington County Board of Education.
Yeah, the Washington County School Board. So WCSD.
Right. So the whole county is, so the district is then subdivided into county boards. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So then from what I understand is that the local boards are really set with the task of implementing policy.
Well, implementing and then picking curriculum.
Okay.
And I am so grateful that I've raised my kids here in Washington County. I have loved their education here. They went to Crimson View Elementary.
How old are they now?
They're 14 and 12. So
14,
I've got
12?
eighth and sixth grade.
Okay.
But I also have 2 older sons from my first marriage that are grown with some grandkids. So I've raised kids, 14 years apart in between my 2 families.
Nice. Totally meant to do that.
And when I was in the Nebo school district in the Spanish Fork area, I had my kids in a little private school to start, and then they did some public school too. And
so, did you go to public high school?
I did.
Okay,
yeah, I was always in public school.
Okay.
I was always public school.
So I went to a private military school for high school.
Okay.
But I was up in Salt Lake. I went to public elementary and middle school. But then for high school, I went to a private military. So like a lot of this is just kind of foreign to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I love that we can have choice, and I think the legislature is working hard to give parents more choice on where they feel their children are best educated. Because I've seen amazing things from homeschool parents, and then you see kids who aren't really being schooled, and
that's the hard thing too, is like even that school choice, I can see the flip side of being like, well, you give school choice and then all of a sudden this district benefits more than this district over here because all the people with money all go over to this district over here because they can choose to go here. And now, you have this socioeconomic divide that starts to occur. And this has happened. This is going back into history. This has happened over and over. Right.
Yeah.
And so I can see that there's a challenge with that. And if the alternative is you can only go to school based off of where you live, you're forced to only have that. You also still end up with something similar. Right. So I can see how it's a challenge to balance those two things.
Yes.
But, you think we do a good job. Your perspective is that we do a good job so far.
I think we do a better job than the rest of the state.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool.
I have loved the teachers that I've worked with. I've seen amazing things in teachers at Crimson View, like some of the best teachers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
My kids had great experience there.
Yeah.
And then I had, and my kids my older boys, when I had them in charter schools, plus I was a single mom at the time, and that was hard. Their dad was in Idaho, but my oldest son said to me, "Mom, please don't do that," to Tag and Doozy are my kids' names. But he was like, he hated wearing the tag. And then my little one, he goes by a nickname, Doozy.
Doozy
is what everybody knows. He's a doozy. He is. It just popped out of my husband's mouth when he was 9 months old. And in preschool, he was like, his teachers would write out Pack. That's his real name. My name has 2 O's. Like, it's Doozy.
Doozy.
When he was 3.
So funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But they were like, please don't do that to them. They felt separated being in the charter school.
Interesting.
And having to wear uniforms while the other kids in the neighborhood were at the public schools. And so then they moved into public schools. But
my boys go to Vista.
Oh, do they?
My boys go to charter school.
And I've
Vista.
heard great things about Vista. In fact,
I love the uniform. I went to a military school. I'm like, yes, you'll wear a uniform. You don't have to think about it.
There is something about the uniform and the order that it brings when you're dressed better. I think you perform better and you take things more seriously. So I do like uniforms for that. I like the chart. I like the option. I think parents should be able to pick what's best for their children, and children learn differently, right? When I was in my education classes, we learned about all the different, some are very auditory, some are visual, some need hands-on. I don't think our schools often meet boys' needs best. I think the traditional school method that we use, it caters more to how girls learn. It's maybe easier. Yeah.
Do you think, because I guess I don't, I guess I have a hard time. I look at the world through a lens of personality profiles and learning styles. I haven't found in my experience, limited as it is, I haven't found that that is separated into genders all that much. But maybe
I just think it's different, and it may be just different children. But I do think there is. I think
there's a maturity level. I could definitely say there's a maturity
quicker, and girls are able to sit still longer.
In general,
yeah. In general, and I think like the Montessori method for some kids is so great, where it's hands-on and you're moving and around. But I actually started my 14-year-old in the Montessori charter school here, and it did not work for him at all. We pulled him out in a month and moved him over to Crimson View, and it was the best decision I made. Like I just can't say enough about how that school for my children, and George Washington was right next to it. And so but because Crimson View was such an amazing experience, and the patriotism they taught, and just the effort that I saw the teachers put in. They would do, and maybe other schools do this as well, but transformation days,
Ooh, what's
different
that?
teachers, and not all the teachers did it in the grades, but like in first grade, the first and second and third grade, some of the teachers, you would show up and the whole classroom is transformed. So they would have like a glow day and everything's blacked out in the class and neon, and they've got glow lights on. And so the kids come, I mean, it's magical. And these teachers are staying up till midnight getting their classrooms ready. Like Stacy McGinnis is one, and Christy Renlisbacher was a first grade teacher that did this. And there's others that would follow along and do it too. But or like a scientist day, where they would come and everything, they'd put on little lab coats, and they had safari day. I'm trying to think of the different, and COVID was when my youngest, they shut it down in March, and they didn't get to go back to school the rest of that year. And he had Stacy McGinnis, who was also my neighbor. And he just said to me, Mom, I had to miss out on probably the best teacher I'm ever going to have in my life. We didn't get to do like 3 of our transformation days. He was so sad, but she did the best she could doing the online, switching to online. And I saw some teachers kind of not, it was hard to pick up with the technology and be ready just to go. She did a great job recording stories and worked so hard with the kids.
That was such a horrible.
It was so horrible.
Poorly executed. Poorly. Yeah, we put ourselves into a weird situation with schooling during COVID. So I mean, I can see how, who you have in leadership positions is really important, right? And every school is going to have different, right?
Yes.
Some of these types of activities, like at the schools, there's a lot of benefit to it. I think some people, like in my mind, I'm like, did the kids learn better, or was that just a fun day? Right. Yeah. And I can't help but think even with my son and my boys so far, as how many days where not really a whole lot of schooling gets done. Elementary's tough, but
it is.
So I can see how this isn't an easy, there's not one way to slice this thing up and to educate the kids.
No,
and so at the state level, where do you think things have gone maybe sideways? Maybe starting with the biggest rocks that we can look at and say, at the state level, this is something that really should be looked at and continue to be improved on, or something where we've gone off the rails.
Okay. Well, I would say ideally you want local school districts to have the most control, right? And the say over how they're going to do things. So
I agree that
Washington County is going to run their school district much differently than maybe a Park City or a Salt Lake City. We've got a different demographic. And that's the beauty of that. We do want it to be separated. Where I see that things have gone wrong is that the state board, I think you have a lot of money being poured to bring things into school districts, and change things, kind of cultural revolution, change norms. We're seeing things across the country where boundaries are being pushed, parents are being undermined, freedom's being undermined. Children are being taught that socialism is the answer that we want to move towards, this new utopian society. And I think local school districts.
That sounds so great, though.
I know. I mean, it's going to be different this time. It's going to be this utopia.
We're going to do it the right way.
We're going to do it. That's what they always say. And I think we're not teaching. And in fact, I had a friend tell me that her son at Desert Hills High School a few years ago in an AP class came home as a junior and was like, because I said, Washington County's doing it better here than other places. And she said, they are, but it's still coming through the curriculum at times, because her son came home from his AP history class as a junior and said, socialism's it. I know where we need to go in the future. And he was really excited about it, but he's not being taught the full history of socialism if they're really believing that. And that's what concerns me as a history teacher. We need to be teaching them the full history, looking at the flaws, learning from the lessons of the past. But we need to study socialism and look at the effect it has had, and communism, on the countries that have that. The devastation, the mass murder, the starvation, when things are just Venezuela. So I want to see our schools return to focusing on academics, teaching kids how to think. So what I was going to say, I feel like the state board has not done enough to back up the local school districts to feel protected in leading out on things. And so there's been a lot of buzz about removing graphic materials from the libraries, sexual books, right?
Yeah.
Why are they in the libraries? And that's a whole nother thing. Like, do school, and there's, on one hand, you have the Library Association, PTA, even kind of sometimes advocating unions and vendors, the book people who are saying it's First Amendment rights, free speech, you're book banning if you're removing these books. Then on the other hand, we've got parents saying, why are my children being exposed to books in a school library that they can check out that have graphic how-to manuals on things that if you read them in a committee hearing in our state Senate, you'll be shut down because they're too graphic. Like I've listened to some of the things in these books.
Oh, I've heard them too.
Right. They have no business in schools. This is not book banning. They're not burning the books. You can still go purchase them in America on your own dime. But what is the responsibility of a school to provide education to children? Are we supposed to be sexualizing our children? Is that the place of education? So I think it's so important to not be emotional, but to talk these things through and ask questions. And the state board has kind of...
So why do you think, what is the argument? What is the argument that's being, so it's on the grounds of the First Amendment, that they're saying it's the First Amendment right of the library. Who picks what that book is?
Well, I mean, I think it's the people who are selling the books and the authors. They're saying you're keeping books from...
But who buys the books? Like, who puts them in the library?
I think, as I understand it, what has happened is before, like through time, Scholastic, other book companies just send books to schools. And you open a new school and they just have a budget and like they equip the library and the books aren't being filtered. They're just getting all the new books and they're winning awards and they're just coming in. And so you've got hundreds of new books. A librarian doesn't have time to sit down and read through all that material. She's just trusting that these books are being brought in by Scholastic or whatever. But now we're seeing you can no longer just trust what they're bringing in. I mean, Scholastic even...
I don't think we should have ever trusted them.
No.
I think the librarian has plenty of time. I think that is the only job of the librarian is
but
to
if you're being sent,
look at the book,
like,
determine on if it's an appropriate book. How are you going
to read thousands of books, though, by yourself? Like, there should be a vetting process before they're even sent to a school. And so I think...
Whether it's, I mean, not to say that it's the single librarian's job to do that. However, it does seem pretty... there's a big gap of the approval of whatever book for a public library system, to an approval process of like, okay, what is this book talking about? And then is it fiction or is it fact? Like, it seems like they already go through some kind of analysis. They have the Dewey Decimal System is specifically to identify and categorize books in these different ways. So it just seems odd to me that there was some disconnect. I'm very skeptical in believing that they didn't know that book was in there or that it had the material that it had in it before it went in there. I feel like they had to have known at some capacity or somebody did.
Well, somebody did. I mean, I feel like the people that are publishing these books and sending them to the schools, like, have to know. But what I have seen is that it's the legislature who's stepping in and passing all kinds of education bills in response to parents crying out and saying, we want help. When the way that I read the Constitution, the State Board of Education has full constitutional authority in our state to take care of it. Yeah. And if our Attorney General's office will back them up, I
think he's still on vacation, right?
I don't know.
Sean, are you there? Oh, no, you're not? Yeah, that's right.
I've heard there's some buzz about the calendar, right? I don't know. That he's actually a friend of ours, and I don't know.
Mr. Reyes, if you're around, I'd love to chat with you. I got lots of questions. So support from the Attorney General's office.
That office is huge. I just think there are people pushing these agendas on our children, and it is our duty in education to educate our children. And I think parents don't want to have fear that schools are exposing their children to things that go against their rights of conscience and belief and morals, things that will push ideas onto kids. And I think often there's even a new bill, I think, that was just passed to teach children about sexual abuse. But I think it's such a fine line. We have to be so careful as we want to protect our children and arm them with the tools they need to be safe. But we don't want to present them with ideas or pictures or models that open their minds up to things they're not ready for.
Well, I actually had this debate with Jeff Watkins, my business partner, who's not here today. We miss you, Jeff. about the government's job in protecting. Like, what does that mean? Like, at what level is the government protecting? Because in the name of protection, they can do a lot of things.
They do a lot of
They
damage.
can do a lot of. They can
right?
do a lot of control. Right. When I
Right.
see protection, I think of control. Right.
Yes.
I think I'm being protected. Okay. Well, I can protect somebody with bars.
Yes.
And an assault rifle. I can also protect them by tying them up and not letting them leave anywhere. It's like, I'm
Right.
going to protect you from the germs of this invisible virus that we
Right.
don't know about, right?
Well,
So, like,
what I would say,
where do we
Yeah.
draw the line with government in protection?
Yes.
And then the job of protecting the kids, it's a very slippery slope as to
Yes.
where we go. And
what
so,
is the proper role?
yeah, where
And
where do we
that's
draw the
important
line?
to
Where does
draw
it
the
stop,
line.
and where does
Yes.
the parent's job
Yes.
to pick up the ball and keep
Because
going?
I think everything we ask the government to do, you give up some freedom. Even if it's a good thing. I mean, things that start with a good intention, we have seatbelt laws. We have to keep a bicycle helmet on.
Story of
Like,
seatbelt laws.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
there's a
haven't
fascinating story
looked
of
into that
seatbelt
for a
laws.
long time, but I remember hearing.
Yeah, it took 20 years.
yeah,
20
to
years
get
to
that.
go through the government
Yeah.
to say, hey, this is the thing. But all of the lobbyists, the auto manufacturers, like, no, that's going to cost too much money. We don't want to do that. It's not
Right.
going to make us any more money. It's only going to cost us
Right.
money. So we're not doing that.
There's
it
a lot
took
of
20
things
years.
like that. Yes.
It's crazy.
But
But
that are
in the
good
name
things,
of
but in the
protection.
in the name of protect. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think, what is the school's role? So I think parents want to trust that we send our we send our children to school to be educated in math and writing and arithmetic. And I would sure like to see a return to critical thinking skills, to being able to reason, look at two sides of issues. And I was introduced to David Barton out of Texas. He's got this curriculum. It's called Wall Builders. And I've listened to several of his talks on. He's got some stuff on YouTube, I guess I would say, lectures that he gives, and you can watch the videos. And I plan to go to one of his seminars hopefully soon. But he teaches biblical history, like foundational history, and looks at the founding fathers and what was their intent, and dives into it. But he just said, we haven't been teaching critical thinking in our public schools for 100 years. It's been more of a, here's the information, read it, learn it, memorize it, take a test. Rather than, unless you take debate, or in science, you hope, like the scientific method. And I still think we have great teachers who do try to up it and go out of like what just the base standards are and teach kids how to think and look at two sides. You hope you're doing that on a research paper or whatever, but but they're not listed and laid out in the standards. And that also, one of the big things I was concerned about was when I looked at the state school board, I remembered a conversation I'd had with a language arts teacher on the last day of school 2 years ago at Sunrise Ridge, where my kids have gone to school, and it's where I'm the PTA president this year. But she came up to me and she just said, they have just redone our language arts standards, and they took critical thinking and grammar out. What are they doing? Like, she said, it's not language arts anymore. It's basically writing standards, or how the standards are written out. And she was so sad about it.
So so the standard, when you say standard, it means, now I've taken the standard out. I've removed the requirement that the teacher actually teaches.
They've removed the requirement that's written by the state that the curriculum is supposed to, is supposed to model and make sure that they get all those standards in. So when they're looking at curriculum and what it has looked like.
So it doesn't say that they can't teach
say
it,
that they
but it's just that there's not this
No.
specific requirement that
Right.
these goals have to be met
Yes.
in order to,
and good teachers, like I said, still try to do that. And I was in our school district, and I went down to meet the superintendent, and I have met the assistant superintendent, Sherry, that's over secondary ed. And I just asked her about that. And she said, well, we still teach those things. And I thought, well, of course they're trying to teach they want to teach those things. These are good things, but it makes me sad that the state standard has taken it out. And just because I'm from Texas, pulled up our language arts standards on the state website and compared them to the Texas language arts standards. And I just feel like ours are really messy, and the way that they're written makes me sad. I just think it should be clearer. And what are our goals? What do we want to turn our students out? Like, the fact that they're coming out with half proficiency, half not being at grade level, reading, writing, I just think we've got to look at the results and say, okay, we've kind of been doing, Utah has its own Common Core method. They changed to the national one and tried to cater it more to Utah values. But what are the results after 10 years of Common Core? Where are our kids? Are they better off or not? And I feel like in the business world, when you're running a business, you look at results, right? If you're not making money, you've got to reboot. And I think Utah does a lot of things really well. And we have we've typically had strong families and morals and patriotism. Those things are written in here, but I just think we can do better. I'd like to be part of solutions to do better and up the standards.
Raise the bar.
Raise the bar. That's my, yeah.
Yeah. So, thinking of all those things, it's interesting because it seems like such a difficult task because there's so many variables coming into play as to why somebody doesn't meet a standard. But a lot of times, so I've heard this with, so Bill Gates, from what I understand, Bill Gates has been the spearhead for teaching math different, right? Like I can't remember what the name. I'm drawing a blank on his method of teaching math.
Yeah.
And he put like $1 billion in to basically educate the teachers on how to teach kids math in order that when they get to the higher levels of math, that they can kind of understand how to connect from the bottom all the way to the top. Makes sense to me. And after, 5 or 10 years or something like that, he looked back at it. They did a review, and his argument was it's because the teachers are teaching it wrong. It's not the kids, and there's nothing wrong with the standard, but it's the teachers push back on some of these changes and say, well, I know we're supposed to do it this way, but the accountability at the teaching level is like, I've taught school for 30 years and now I got to teach language arts differently and I'm not going to do that. Right. And so that accountability, like in the classroom, can be really tough. It's like, it's almost impossible to force somebody that's taught math for 15 years and, they're getting close to retirement, but they're not quite there yet. And it's like, hey, you need to teach math differently now. And they're like, I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, I'm going to keep teaching them this way. And there can be domino effects and second and third order consequences that are hard to control.
Sure. I think it's hard looking at the standardized tests and the way, I don't think we're better off now than when they were put in place. I think teachers have always had more of a beat on their own children and how they're doing in the classroom. And I think it's better. To me, it seems like when we had like the 4th grade, the 8th grade, and the 12th grade tests, that was a good enough measure. I'm not sure that the standardized test now, the RISE, I'm not happy with the results that I'm seeing with kids. Yeah. I'm sad that my children, that I'm watching my own children not be engaged in education. And the tests aren't even, used to be you were tested by what you learned in your classroom. And so it was based on what the teacher was teaching. But I have had teachers say to me, everybody wants accountability, of course, right? You want to look at results and merits. And I understand that argument and the need for that too. But teachers are they're being held accountable for how their students do on these tests. And yet the tests come down from a national company. They don't see them ahead of time. They're not aware of the questions. So it's almost like the teachers are being tested, but is it a fair assessment of what's happened in the classroom for the year? And if students are jumping into the class 2 weeks before the tests and maybe don't know English, which is happening because I've spoken to teachers who have mentioned that, they're still being forced to take the test, and that is a grade on the teacher. Is that fair to our teachers?
Yeah, that's weird.
We're seeing a lot of burnout from teachers with extra surveys. Social emotional learning has been a big thing that they've pushed, and our district has adopted too, that worries me for the results. We're pulling things away. We're distracting from academics and taking over the role, I think, that is primarily the family role. And I think the meaning behind it, the intent is good. They want to help kids who are struggling. But is it really? What are the results? Are we seeing depression, anxiety, fear, other big things fall? Or are they getting worse? And I worry about
it's called social and what?
Social emotional learning, SEL.
Social emotional learning. Huh. Interesting.
So teachers are being asked to take on more of a therapist role in their classroom, as well as teaching, as well as getting their kids. They're putting so much on our teachers. And I've talked to teachers in my kids' schools, and people, teachers are feeling the burnout. And learning should be fun and engaging, and it's not going to be for everybody, and different kids have different aptitudes, but gosh, I think we're putting so much on our teachers to try to solve all these different things and placing them. I think it's unfair.
Yeah.
I would love to see our teachers kind of unchained from the tethers of surveys and who's collecting the data on the surveys. Where's that going? And tests to content that they're teaching in their classrooms. I don't know, bring it more to a better level. Social and emotional learning. Like the thing that popped into my head is like, these are skills and things that we should be teaching kids at home. Like this is what parents should be teaching Absolutely.
kids.
Home is the forefront. And I know there's this national talk about teachers versus parents and parents feeling unwelcome at school board meetings. And probably with school board and parents often and teachers, people don't come and express things unless they're mad and upset. And
that's my experience. Yeah.
Yes.
From me watching.
Right.
Like I've gone to a couple of our board meetings and there's never anybody there, by the way.
Yeah.
There's never anybody there.
There's a few, not very many.
But the only time somebody's there is when they're upset about something.
Which is sad.
And so when I went the last couple of times I went, they're like, what are you here for? And this like, are you going to say something that we're not really prepared for? I was like, I'm just here to watch.
Yeah.
I'm just here to, he's like, well, we do it online. I was like, yeah, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't want to look at it on a video, right? Yeah. It's in my thought, it's kind of like this, it's this, we could say it's online and then it's convenient for, parents to be able to watch it, but is it just giving them the out? Be like, I can watch it later, right? Yeah. And they always have this out, but they're not really engaged in it.
It's true.
It's different when you go in person. Yeah. And then I didn't have anything to say, and then they're still curious, like, but why are you here? Yeah. I want to watch what's going on. I want to pay attention to what's happening. It's not a good or bad, but for the most part, and the ones that I've been when there was something contentious, it was packed full of people, packed with teachers, packed with parents. Only when there was something bad happening, and I get that. That's the accountability piece.
But it's unfortunate, right?
It is unfortunate, and our voices should be able to be heard.
Because we have a lot of good things. I actually went to a couple this year because I'm a PTA president, and we have this amazing regional PTA president, Kim McComb, who rallies everybody. She's done the best training. We're on this group thread as PTA presidents, and every month I get texts from her. Going to the local school board meeting, I always have a time slot. Is there anything good happening in your schools that I can report back? And I've so appreciated that. So I've gone a couple times because of her encouragement, and I got to be there when Crimson View's Melody Theme, who was my son's 4th grade teacher that he adored, and she was amazing. And then she had her husband also teaches there. He's a 5th grade teacher, but they were there. There were several teachers there, and she got a national award. And so I just happened to get to be at the PTA meeting where she was being recognized, and it was awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
To see that and
hearing that communication and getting that communication.
Yeah,
I think that's great. It's my analysis. From the outside looking in at this kind of stage, is that the school system has not evolved for the cultural change that's happened within the country, and it's also bloated to this massive size, which we have a big population. There's a lot of teachers. I think there's like 30,000 teachers across the state of Utah.
Yes, and in a lot of counties, the school district is the largest employer, including ours.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is this is a running conversation where the government employs millions of people, millions of people, and so in itself is a massive economic driver of its communities.
Yes.
But in Washington County, the largest employers, the top five largest employers, it's medical, government, school and government, right? So whether it's the city governments or the school district, and then Walmart, that's rounds out the top 5.
Wow.
So you have these, public institutions that are benefiting from the taxpayers that are the largest employers of those counties. And when that much economic weight is being swung within the counties, it gives them a lot of power and a lot of clout. And so we get this bloated, administrative, system or section of the economy that it's really tough to control. I was looking at the state budget. This is 2023. Total public education was for enrollment. I guess this is 2020. Oh yeah, the estimated in 23, fall of 23 was 675,000 kids, and then That's employment. I was going to look at what the budget was because I got percentages here, and that's not what I wanted.
Oh, the budget's huge.
School trust fund. The permanent school trust fund is $2.9 billion. The select, those are reserves, liabilities, outstanding debt. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not going to find it. Do you know what the budget was?
I think it was like what the total budget
600,000. I'm going to find it.
But I feel like, the budgets are huge, but
not 600,000. That's not right.
No. It's in the billions, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. For our state, isn't it? Like it's.
Oh, appropriations. I had it saved.
I should know.
No,
there's so much to learn in this. I'm just, like I said, I've just been doing a deep dive for 5 months. So
yeah. So when you think of like all these, I think it was like 600 million. I think it was like $600 million.
Okay.
And then like the per student allocation, they just raised, but it was somewhere in the $4,000.
Yeah, and
like
do you know the acronym for that? Like you have a weighted pupil unit, the WPU.
That was it. That was what I was looking at.
That's what I've memorized.
The weighted pupil What is
weighted pupil unit, WPU. And what I have learned with that, like Washington counties was I think around 8,000 something. And versus like a Salt Lake County school district spends double, 16,000 per student, but we have better rates than they do. So the amount of money being spent per pupil does not equate to outcomes. But I've heard teachers here too say that they felt like they had a lot more resources in Salt Lake in their classrooms as far as technology and than ours do here. So I just think, where is the money going? And that's always the case, right?
That's kind of what I was trying to find where's the money going?
There's a big disparity between what administrators and superintendents make. This was new to me. Not that I don't value superintendents. They do a really important job. But do you know that most superintendents make more than the governor?
Wow.
Yeah, that was.
How much is that?
It depends on the size of their school district. So it can range, from the 150, 60, and then they've got their benefits packages. I have it on my phone somewhere. I have
public education. This is public education fiscal year of 2024. This is the allotted amount, public education. So this is excluding higher education. So it's 8 billion. Okay, 8,433 million.
Yeah. It's huge. It's
8 billion.
Big money. But I think how much of the money, we're not getting enough money to our teachers. Teaching is hard. It's a rewarding.
So hard.
It is a service. It's such a noble profession. And it is such a shame to me that often the best teachers don't stay in the classroom because they can't afford to. So they're moving to administration. Or my dad was a 4th grade teacher when my mom met him. And I remember being 13, 14, and having his adult students come up and just say, your dad taught me, with tears in their eyes, how much it meant to them that he was their 4th grade teacher, right? But he couldn't afford to raise a family and be a teacher. And that was, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it was way back a long time ago.
So if I did the math, so that 8,433,000,000, if we just divide it by the total student enrollment, that number that I just said, that it's 12,000 basically $500, but the weighted pupil is $4,600. So the difference between that is that what I'm seeing that is that the per student allotment of what we're doing is that there's $8,000 here that's going somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
there's going to be
the schools are penalized based on absences, and so it's hard. Like
it's weird.
There are parents that are opting their kids.
The schools punished if the students don't show up.
Their money is withheld by the amount of absences, and so you've got schools and teachers really frustrated if you're pulling your kids out. Like I've had my son not wanting to go to some of the classes because he's totally done with all his tests, and they're just reading. He just has to sit there and read a book. And then it penalizes the school if I pick him up. Like, is that fair? I mean, if he's not really learning and engaged, he's just sitting there reading, but it harms, I don't know. There's.
Yeah. And then are we talking about it in reverse? It's that the school doesn't qualify for.
It's based on the amount of butts in the seat, like the amount of money they get every day.
Yeah.
It changes.
Well, I guess how else would you do it?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's pros and cons to both sides, and I need to study this more, but I I feel my kid's pain too, not wanting to just sit there and read when he's already finished his work. If, so we've scheduled an appointment, or we've.
Yeah. Like approved absence versus not approved absence. And then, is it,
and then I feel bad too.
Percentage of the year, like we really start to this accountability thinking. We could go overboard on it too. It's like there's so many moving parts. Holy cow!
They've actually created positions in school districts to go find kids and work with them that are missing too much. To try to find out why and get them back into the school. So we're paying somebody now to go do that to get our students back in. But
there's a financial incentive to them coming and being a butt in the seat.
Yeah.
But
I worry that we have like charter schools. The largest charter school network in Utah is called American Preparatory Academy, APA. And they have really
Are they affiliated with the Freedom Preparatory Academy here in town?
I don't think so. I don't think that. And actually I worked for Freedom Academy up in Provo. So that's part of the Freedom Academy. So it's not. So
maybe they're affiliated separately.
It's a separate school. But APA, the state board did an investigation on them, and maybe this is a different thing, but that was concerning to me. They have higher rates in their reading classes. They break their kids up into all these different reading groups. They use 3 or 4 or 5 different curriculums, and the state board has come in and tried to penalize them and tell them that they need to get rid of their curriculum and adopt the newer curriculums that check off their boxes for their new policies and standards. Yet they're showing results where I just think, shouldn't that school be training others on what they're doing because their results are so much better?
And so the reason behind it, maybe getting to the bottom of like understanding the reason behind that.
Yeah, what is the reason? And they did an investigation on the school that cost tons of money for their special ed funding. And they assimilate their special education students. They don't pull them out into separate classrooms. They do things a little differently. And there was a vote that came up asking, wanting them to pay back the money for the investigation, even though they didn't find any evidence of wrongdoing, as I understand it. And it would have cost millions of dollars and shut their doors. And I was concerned that certain board members voted to penalize them and make them pay this money back that I did not think was fair. So
money as an incentive is a weird thing in education.
But it's a weird thing in education. And I've started watching some of the legislature meetings on like the sensitive materials. Representative Ivory ran a bill, HB 29, I think the legislature keeps responding to parents who are saying, please help us. Things are wrong in the schools. And you see this overabundance of education bills passed. I think it was over 130 this last session. The state board could be handling a lot of those things. So it feels like when the legislature is having to do this is a vote of confidence that the state board is not doing their job. And so I don't know if the unions and the vendors and the curriculum are holding too much sway. This is still something I've got to get in and study and learn more about, but that's how it looks.
Yeah.
As I'm, starting to watch this, I just think, and you watch the committee hearing meetings and people from the school, like the staff and curriculum, they file in and they're watching, and the library association and whoever it is. I just think, to me, in education, the number one customer should be the student and the parents and the teachers. Like, this should be our number one concern. What's happening in the classroom? Are our children learning? Are we providing a safe learning environment for them? And what are the results? Let's look at the results. If we're not getting the results, let's change things and make them better.
There's a big conversation, at least from most of like the different forums or different, delegate meetings and things that I've been to, is the influence of federal education dollars at the state, and then how it trickles down and some of the strings that are attached.
Yeah.
Where do you stand? What's your thought process on how that flow of money is occurring?
It sounds really easy, I think, to say we just need to cut ties with the federal government. I do think that needs to be studied and looked at. Would Utah be better off? I believe it represents about 9% of our education budget. So
growing. I think it keeps growing.
And it keeps growing. But yeah, I just think everything comes with strings when you take federal money. And so a lot of the books that are in question, curriculum, ideologies, surveys that are being written that undermine people in Utah's morals and beliefs. And we have laws on the book that say schools are not supposed to infringe on the rights of conscience or on beliefs. So federally, there's a lot different values than what we hold for the most part here dear in Utah with our family values and our belief in religious liberty and not wanting to be under the control of one religion.
Do you think the federal government should have any like educational,
I don't think
should funding go towards education in any way at the federal level from your perspective?
With the results that we're seeing with the federal government stepping in, I would love to cut ties.
Yeah.
I think we'd be better off if Utah took the reins of our own education system. I would love to have teams that really study that. And is it feasible? Can we do that? How could, I think it would take a massive army, but I think it would be worth it with the things we're seeing come down, especially in light of the Biden administration and the things that they're passing, the new restrictions and the way that they've changed Title IX to rewrite the definition of a woman to be someone who identifies as a woman. And Speaker Schultz just came out and said, we are going to sue. We're going to join the other states. So hooray for Speaker Schultz taking that on. So I hope our Attorney General's office and the state board and everybody will back this up. I think there are certain hills worth dying on. And I think protecting girls' sports and spaces is one of those places where we don't open up our locker rooms and showers and dorm rooms and field trips, that we need to be very careful about how we proceed with this.
Yeah.
And push back.
I think there's a lot of challenges with the federal government coming in and holding strings, but I can also see how as a state board member, they're saying here's this whatever that $8 billion. They're like here's $10 million. This is $10 million. You can do a lot with this $10 million, and you're having to say, no, I don't want that $10 million.
Right.
And how difficult that could be is a decision.
Yes. And when principals are faced, so I sat down, I'm on the community council and the PTA, and I feel the pain that the principals have to try to figure out things within their own budget. So there are surveys that they're giving to the children. Well, some of the surveys have concerning questions in them, which I've read, and I'm concerned myself, but so
what's any weird,
for elementary school children, are you a boy, girl, or do you prefer not to say? Why are we presenting that idea to a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old?
Why do they care if they're a boy or a girl?
Yeah. So,
what's the point of the survey?
And different data on climate change. Are you safe at the dinner table? What are the conversations your parents have? There's
crazy.
There are questions about all different kinds of drugs. If you wanted to buy drugs, would you know where to get them? And then it lists all these different kinds of drugs. This is like the 6th and 7th grade survey. So the legislature's now made it, they passed a bill, and I don't know what the bill number is, but schools do not have to give these surveys. And now they're opt-in. They used to be opt-out. So if you followed the emails, you could opt your child out of the survey.
So they're automatically opted in, which seems already not the right way to do it.
Now you actually have to opt in. And so our principal, she was like, can you encourage your parents to opt into these surveys because it brings money? Because she feels the squeeze of not having enough in her budget. But the survey questions are concerning. So I'm like, why is this what's required to bring money into the classroom? Why aren't our schools funded well enough? I would like to see us not have to buy all these new curriculums and send money. I mean, it's so much money that goes to the people who are writing the books and writing the curriculum and vendors. And let's look at where the money's really going and how can we get it to our schools more. Our principal said she's seeing things this year in Little Valley, Utah, that she's never seen before. Rates of kids who don't have their utilities, they're homeless, they're hungry.
Wow.
Breaks my heart. School budgets where she's had her school lunch money budget $5,000 in the arrears in our school. And she said there's programs if parents would just reach out to us and let us know. But I think there's maybe a shame factor with it. Parents aren't filling out the forms. They're just not paying for the lunches. And then she's got to cover that with her own budget. It's, I don't know. It's so huge.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I would love to see us treat the schools as individuals and meet with, come up with more solutions that help. But to think that they're actually doing laundry for some of the kids she said they've been taking some of the kids' coats that they can tell have never been washed and washing them during the day while the children are at school. They've got a food closet now at our school where they're sending lunches home. This is in Little Valley, St. George.
These are a lot of complex issues.
It is.
These are a lot of complex issues.
I feel for the teachers. I feel for the principals. They're dealing with so much more that they've never had to deal with, trying to figure these things out. It's not cut and dried one way or the other. And so I think, there's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of good things.
A lot of good.
There's a lot of good things.
And
we covered some good things. We covered a lot of not great things.
But there's a lot of great things. Great teachers who just want to teach their subjects, who love their their students. There's a lot of great things to highlight, and that needs to be focused on too.
Yeah. And I think I'm skeptical of, like, when I see ratings of the schools, like even Vista, it's a charter school. And when you look at what their rating is, if you go to like a website, it's like, what are the best schools in Utah? Vista doesn't have like great ratings. And I'm like, I know a lot of those kids. I've spent a lot of time in volunteering for those kids. My wife spent a lot of time volunteering for the teachers and the kids. A lot of smart kids, a lot of great teachers. Yeah. My boys are learning quite a bit. And I see, through robotics and then the music capabilities and like all these amazing things that school does. It's like, you can't really trust what this like rating is of these schools. So, in Southern Utah or in Utah in general, I would say our public education system is actually excellent. It doesn't always show that way in these like public rating systems. I don't know how they come up with them a lot of times and how they're rating, but going back to these surveys and it seems like we've made this thing so complex, and and it is already complex. I think just in general, schooling kids in different, economic brackets and that the emotional things and the social things that you have to deal with in schooling. I get it. These are all complex things. This job is not an easy one.
It's not,
especially since you have to run as an elected individual. Yeah. So there's a popularity contest element to it. Yeah. But you were very popular, so you won the delegate vote for the Republican Party like by 85%.
I did,
which is for a challenger. Yeah, is pretty amazing. So there's a lot of people that have talked to you and vetted you and feel like you would do a great job. So that was the main reason why I'm like, I got to talk to Joanne. 85% of the delegates to agree on that that's a big victory. What do you think? Is there one reason why, do you think?
I think people can sense that something's not going right. I mean, like I said, Utah has a lot of things going well. But I think the direction that our education system is, what they're focused on and where they're heading is not the right direction. I think my message has been, we need our Southern Utah values influencing that state school board, not having Salt Lake, East Coast values being shoved on us. And so I'm not running for like popularity or personality. I'm just running to serve. I want to have things made better. I want to raise the bar. I want us to focus on academic excellence. I want to bring teachers and parents together, because if we're working together, if we can get more involvement, positive involvement with the parents, like you said, volunteering in the schools is so huge. Yeah, and I feel so grateful that with my second set of children, I was able to do that at Crimson View and work with the teachers, try to take some of their load off. I helped do reading tests. I would come in and, make copies for the teachers. I just try to take some of the extra load off, because there's so much work to do. And when you're an elementary school teacher, you don't really have a prep period. You maybe have a little bit of recess but there's a lot of busy work that people don't see. You take your work home with you as a teacher. It's tiring and it's emotionally draining. I was a single mom when I was teaching, so I felt that. I feel for our teachers. But the more you can have positive partnerships with parents, not just the parents who are coming in because they're mad at you and you're, but helping their children learn, that's where we're going to find the best solutions. And I think that's why Utah has been stronger. Like we have strong families and I know Washington County, especially, like you see it in our schools, that there's more parental involvement and it helps. But I think my message of just restoring patriotism and excellence, academics, focusing on academics and the children is what resonated. America is the greatest country in the world. And if we should teach our children that, and they should come out feeling proud to be American, not embarrassed by it.
I will say this, it's easy when you're running for a political office to reduce things down to talking points. And every time I've heard you talk, if there's something that you don't know, you're like, I'm still learning. I'm still learning about all this stuff. I don't know anything. And I appreciate that.
Thanks.
I appreciate that your willingness to learn. And it's a tough job. It seems to me like it's a job that, there's not enough, you can't prepare enough for it.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a way to be like, okay, now I'm prepared to take the job. It's like, I'm going to sit on
constant learning.
And we're constantly moving the target. Sounds like we keep moving the targets, right? We keep moving what the goals are and what the situations are. So anybody in that position has to be willing to be agile and think on their feet and stand on certain principles, which I think you've conveyed what yours are pretty well, at least in this conversation, but even throughout like the campaign season. So I want to wish you the best of luck too. What were we going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I feel for the incumbent that I'm running against because she's a full-time teacher. This is a big job. Yeah. So what I do feel excited about, I do have the time. I'm a stay-at-home mom and I'm willing to learn. And I've been inspired by the people that have come to say, we'll help you. We're going to put you through boot camp. Former legislators, the former president of the Utah Tax Commission, like they're ready and willing to help me be prepared. So there is a lot to learn. It will be a continual process if I'm chosen. And I'm just here to give people a choice.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you getting out there and being willing to serve. And don't let the negativity of the campaigning get to you. Stay strong. It's just now summer. We're just getting into the summer season. School's just about to get out. And so I think the heat's going to get turned up a little bit.
Yeah.
But you got a lot of supporters out there, so best of luck to you.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming on. And I'd love to chat with you more about it as you continue to learn.
That'd be great. Thanks. My first podcast. So.
This is it. The 435 podcast is the first one.
First one, yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. But we'll have a good day. We'll talk to you again.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you out there.